They say blood is thicker than water, but when my own daughter slammed the door in my face as snow piled up outside, I learned sometimes family ties are as fragile as glass. What she didn't realize? The keys to their dream vacation home were still in my purse. Today, I'm sharing how I went from shivering in my car during the worst blizzard in decades to reclaiming my dignity and teaching my ungrateful family the hardest lesson they'd ever learn. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I never thought at 68 years old I'd be starting over. My name is Martha Wilson, and for 43 years I poured everything into being a good wife and mother. After my husband Gerald passed away 5 years ago, I thought my daughter Rebecca would be my rock. Instead, I discovered just how quickly decades of love can be forgotten when money and convenience come into play. It all started last December. The first snowflakes had just begun falling outside my kitchen window as I stirred a pot of homemade chicken soup, Rebecca's favorite since childhood. My phone buzzed with a text from her. "Mom, Daniel and I need to talk to you, coming over in 20. No pleasantries, no explanation. Just the kind of abrupt message my daughter had started sending since marrying Daniel Pierce 3 years ago. I quickly set the table for 3, added a bit more salt to the soup, and pulled a freshly baked loaf of sourdough from the oven. Maybe they had good news. Perhaps a grandchild finally on the way? At 37, Rebecca had been focused entirely on her career at Daniel's real estate development firm, but lately she'd mentioned reconsidering their family timeline. The front door opened with a blast of cold air. Rebecca stepped in first, removing her designer boots with practiced precision. Daniel followed, his tall frame still bundled in a cashmere overcoat that probably cost more than my monthly social security check. Neither smiled. "Mom," Rebecca didn't even glance at the set table or the steaming pot of soup. "We need to discuss your living situation." I motioned toward the kitchen. "Let's talk over lunch? I made your favorite." Daniel checked his watch. "Actually, we can't stay. We have a meeting with investors in an hour. This won't take long." The way he said "this" sent a chill up my spine worse than the winter wind outside. I sat on the edge of my chair, hands folded in my lap like a schoolgirl about to be reprimanded. Rebecca took a deep breath. "Mom, we think it's time you downsize. This house is too big for just you, and frankly, the maintenance is becoming an issue." I looked around my modest 3-bedroom home, the same one where I'd raised Rebecca, where I'd nursed Gerald through his final months. Yes, the paint was fading in spots, and the kitchen dated back to the 90s, but it was immaculate. I'd always been meticulous about maintenance. "What issues?" I asked, genuinely confused. Daniel pulled out his phone, scrolling through photos. "The gutters are sagging on the east side. The driveway needs resurfacing. The landscaping is overgrown." He thrust the phone toward me, showing close-ups of minor imperfections I hadn't even noticed. I can take care of those things," I stammered. "Gerald left enough for basic repairs." Rebecca's expression softened momentarily, the first hint of the daughter I recognized. "Mom, it's not just the repairs. We're worried about you here alone, especially with winter coming. Remember last year when you fell bringing in groceries?" A minor slip on ice that had resulted in nothing more than a bruised hip, but they'd referenced it constantly since then. "We've found the perfect solution," Daniel interjected. "Morningside Village. It's a wonderful senior community with everything you need: activities, dining options, medical care on site." Rebecca brightened. "You'll make friends your own age. No more worrying about home maintenance or shoveling snow." "But I like taking care of my home," I said quietly. "And I have friends here. My garden club, my church group." Daniel glanced at his watch again. "Martha, be practical. You're getting older. This neighborhood is changing. Younger families moving in, property values fluctuating. Selling now makes financial sense before the market shifts. The real reason emerged like a shark fin breaking water. This wasn't about my well-being. This was about my property. My lot was nearly an acre, one of the larger ones in a neighborhood that had become increasingly desirable. "We've already scheduled a meeting with Morningside for tomorrow," Rebecca said, pulling out a glossy brochure. "Just to tour. No pressure." But there was pressure. It radiated from them like heat from a furnace. I took the brochure with trembling hands. "And," Daniel added with a tight smile, "we've taken the liberty of having Thompson Realty evaluate your home. Preliminary estimate puts it at around $425,000. After the Morningside entrance fee, you'd still have a nice nest egg. $425,000. Not once had they asked if I wanted to move. Not once had they consulted me before, contacting realtors and retirement communities. They'd planned my entire future over my head, like I was a child incapable of making decisions. "I need time to think," I managed to say. Rebecca stood, checking her own watch now. "Of course, Mom." "Sleep on it. We'll pick you up tomorrow at 10 for the tour." They left without hugging me goodbye. They left without noticing the soup or bread. They left without asking a single question about how I was feeling or what I wanted. I sat alone at my kitchen table, the snow falling heavier outside, and felt the first crack form in my heart. The Morningside Village tour was a blur of beige walls and identical apartments. The residents resembled well-dressed ghosts, drifting through community rooms, with vacant smiles. Everything smelled faintly of disinfectant, masked by artificial floral scents. The deluxe one-bedroom apartment they showed me was half the size of my master bedroom. The waiting list for these units is typically 6 months. The admissions, director told us, but we've had a cancellation. This particular unit could be available as early as next month. Rebecca squeezed my arm. "Isn't that lucky, Mom? It's perfect timing." Perfect for whom? I wondered. That evening, Rebecca and Daniel invited me to dinner at their luxurious downtown condo, a rare occurrence. Over an elaborate meal they barely touched, they laid out their timeline. I would list my house immediately, move to Morningside within 30 days, and they would handle selling most of my furniture since there simply won't be room for all these outdated pieces. "We're thinking of buying your property ourselves, actually," Daniel said casually, swirling expensive scotch in a crystal glass. "As an investment, the lot has potential for development." "Development?" I echoed. "You mean tearing down my home?" Rebecca patted my hand. "Daniel's company is exploring opportunities for luxury duplexes in established neighborhoods. Your lot is ideal. Large, corner location, mature trees that add value." I stared at them. "You want to profit? From my home?" Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "Mom," Rebecca sighed with thinly veiled frustration. "We're helping you. Real estate is just business. You taught me to be practical, remember?" I had taught her many things: kindness, gratitude, respect. Those lessons seemed forgotten. For 2 weeks, I endured daily calls about listings, moving companies, and what items I really needed to keep. I felt increasingly cornered, like a fox with hounds closing in. On a snowy Friday morning, Rebecca arrived unannounced with empty boxes and color-coded stickers. Green for Morningside, yellow for storage, red for donation, blue for selling, she explained, already placing a red sticker on the antique sideboard Gerald had restored for our 25th anniversary. "Stop," I said, my voice surprisingly firm. "I haven't agreed to any of this." Rebecca froze, stickers in hand. "Mom, we've been over this. The Morningside contract needs to be signed by Monday to secure your spot." "I'm not signing anything." Her expression hardened. "You're being irrational. This is the best option. For everyone." "For everyone?" Or for you and Daniel's development plans? That's unfair, she snapped. We're trying to take care of you before you become a burden. The word sliced through me. Burden. After all those years of caring for her, loving her, sacrificing for her, I was now reduced to a burden. I think you should leave, I said quietly. Mom, please go, Rebecca. She gathered her boxes and stickers, muttering about stubborn old people as she left. For the first time, I locked the door behind her. That night, I couldn't sleep. Wind howled around the eaves of my house, my home, where every corner held memories. I thought about the property and what it was actually worth, not just in dollars, but in history. Then I remembered something else, something tucked away in Gerald's office that I hadn't considered in years. I padded down the hallway to the room I'd left largely untouched since his passing. In the bottom drawer of his desk, beneath folders of insurance policies and tax returns, I found a leather portfolio labeled Investments and Properties. Inside was the deed to a property I'd almost forgotten, a lakefront cabin in the Adirondacks that Gerald had inherited from his uncle in the 1980s. We'd visited occasionally when Rebecca was young, but after purchasing a more accessible vacation property closer to our primary home, we'd rented the cabin out through a management company. The income had been modest but steady, automatically reinvested according to Gerald's instructions. What caught my eye wasn't the deed itself, but the most recent tax assessment slipped behind it, dated just 2 years ago. The property value had increased tenfold since we'd acquired it. The rustic 3-bedroom cabin now sat on land worth over $2 million, thanks to luxury development throughout the region. I was not a burden. I was not destitute. I was not dependent on my daughter's conditional charity. With shaking hands, I reached for my phone and called the only person I trusted for honest advice, my sister-in-law, Helen, who had been a real estate attorney before retirement. Martha? Her voice was groggy with sleep. It's nearly midnight. Is everything all right? I need your help, I said. And I need you to keep this conversation completely confidential. The next morning brought the heaviest snowfall of the season. Weather alerts warned of blizzard conditions developing by afternoon. I was organizing paperwork at my kitchen table when Rebecca called. Mom, Daniel and I are coming over. We need to finalize the Morningside paperwork today. There's a blizzard warning, I protested. The roads will be dangerous. It's just snow, Mom. We'll be there in 20 minutes. Have your checkbook ready for the deposit. Before I could respond, she hung up. I looked down at the documents. Helen had helped me prepare until 3 a.m. Timing was everything now. True to her word, Rebecca's luxury SUV pulled into my driveway exactly 20 minutes later. She and Daniel hurried through the thickening snow, briefcase in hand, expressions determined. I met them at the door without inviting them in. I've made my decision, I said firmly, handing Rebecca an envelope. She opened it, confusion crossing her face as she scanned the single-page letter inside. What is this? My formal notice that I will not be selling my home or moving to Morningside Village. As the letter states, I've consulted with legal counsel and understand my rights as a homeowner. Daniel tried to look over her shoulder. Legal counsel? Martha, that's unnecessary. We're family. Yes, we are family, I agreed. Which is why I'm surprised you would try to pressure me out of my home for your development project without full disclosure of your financial interest. Rebecca's face flushed. Mom, you're blowing this out of proportion. We found a naive old woman you could manipulate for profit, I finished for her. I may be older, but I'm not stupid, Rebecca. Daniel's professional veneer cracked. Listen, Martha, this attitude isn't helpful. We're looking out for your best interests. No, you're looking out for your balance sheet. Now, unless you're here to visit your mother with genuine concern, I suggest you both leave. Rebecca's eyes narrowed. You've been talking to someone. Who? Helen? She's always been jealous of our success. Snow swirled around us as we stood in the doorway, the temperature dropping by the minute. I didn't respond to her accusation. Mom, you're making a huge mistake. That Morningside apartment won't be available again, and when you change your mind in a month, don't come crying to us. I won't. Daniel checked his phone. Weather's getting worse. Let's go, Rebecca. Your mother has made her choice. He turned to me with cold professionalism. Martha, when you reconsider, and you will, our offer for the property stands, though I can't guarantee the same terms. As they turned to leave, Rebecca paused. By the way, we're going up to Crescent Lake this weekend for a business retreat. At least some members of this family are thinking about the future. Crescent Lake, the exclusive development adjacent to my Adirondack property. The irony almost made me smile. Drive safely, was all I said, closing the door as they trudged back to their vehicle. I watched from the window as they backed down my driveway, already arguing inside the car. The snow was coming down harder now, visibility decreasing by the minute. I should have felt victorious after standing my ground, but instead, I felt hollow. When had my daughter become this person? When had money and status replaced kindness and respect in her values? The weather deteriorated rapidly over the next few hours. By late afternoon, a full blizzard was raging, with wind gusts approaching 50 miles per hour and snow accumulating at 2 inches per hour. I was making tea when my phone rang, an unknown number. Mrs. Wilson? This is Officer Diaz with State Highway Patrol. Your contact information was listed as emergency for Rebecca Pierce. My heart lurched. Yes, that's my daughter. What's happened? There's been an accident, ma'am. Black ice on Route 87. Their vehicle slid off the road and struck a guardrail. No serious injuries, but their car isn't drivable. Relief flooded through me. Where are they now? At our station in Millbrook. We're about to close due to the storm conditions. They need someone to pick them up immediately. Millbrook was nearly an hour away in good conditions. In this weather. I'll come get them, I said without hesitation. The drive was treacherous. My old Subaru struggled through drifts already forming across back roads. Twice I nearly turned around, but the thought of Rebecca stranded kept me pushing forward. The highway patrol station was a small outpost, nearly dark when I arrived. Only a single officer remained inside with Rebecca and Daniel, both looking shaken and disheveled. Daniel had a cut above his eyebrow, butterfly bandaged closed. Rebecca's wrist was wrapped in an elastic bandage. Neither looked pleased to see me. Your mother drove through this mess to get you, Officer Diaz said with obvious approval. Lucky to have family willing to do that. Rebecca mumbled a thank you as they collected their overnight bags salvaged from their wrecked SUV. The tension in the car on the return journey was palpable. The cabin reservation at Crescent Lake. Daniel finally broke the silence. We'll never make it tonight. You can stay with me, I offered. Wait out the storm safely. Rebecca's silence spoke volumes. She didn't want to stay with me, even in a blizzard, but they had no choice. Back at my house, I made up the guest room with fresh sheets and towels, prepared a simple dinner of soup and sandwiches, and gave Daniel some of Gerald's old clothes to change into. They accepted my hospitality with stiff politeness, retreating to the guest room immediately after eating, the door closing with finality. I sat in my living room watching the snow transform my world into a blank canvas, wondering if anything would ever break through the wall between my daughter and me. Around midnight, I heard their hushed, angry voices from the guest room. Complete disaster. The investors expected us tonight. Now Marshall's group will get the first presentation. It's not my fault the car skidded, Rebecca. We should have taken my car. Your fancy sports tires are useless in snow. Can we focus on the actual problem? We're stuck in your mother's house with no transportation, 30 miles from the most important presentation of the year, in the middle of a blizzard. Their voices dropped lower, and I moved away from the hallway, not wanting to eavesdrop further. Whatever business opportunity they were upset about missing seemed more important to them than their narrow escape from serious injury. The next morning brought sunshine reflecting blindingly off 3 feet of pristine snow. Roads were impassable, power lines down across the county. We were effectively stranded for at least another day. Over a tense breakfast, Rebecca finally addressed me directly. "Mom, I need to use your car. The main highways might be cleared by now." "They're not," I said, showing her the emergency alerts on my phone. "Even the plows are stuck." "We have to get to Crescent Lake today," Daniel insisted. "This meeting can't wait." I contemplated their desperation, remembering Helen's advice from our late-night strategy session. Sometimes the right lesson comes at the unexpected moment. "What's this meeting about?" I asked innocently. Rebecca hesitated, then apparently decided honesty might gain my cooperation. "Waterfront development opportunities. A group of investors is looking at property around Crescent Lake for luxury vacation homes. Daniel's presenting our company's vision this weekend." "I see." I sipped my coffee. "And these investors? They're only meeting with your company?" Daniel shifted uncomfortably. "There are competitors, 3 development firms presenting concepts. But we had the earliest slot, which typically leaves the strongest impression." "Sounds important." Rebecca leaned forward. "It's everything, Mom. This project could establish us nationally. We're talking about a $30 million development." I nodded thoughtfully. "Well, the roads to Crescent Lake will be cleared?" "Eventually. Probably by tomorrow." "Tomorrow is too late." Rebecca's composure cracked. "By then, Marshall Development will have swooped in and taken our investors." "I might be able to help," I said slowly. "There is one way to reach Crescent Lake today." Their attention snapped to me like predators sighting prey. "The lake property adjacent to Crescent Lake," I explained. "It has a private access road that connects to the lake community. The elevation is lower, more protected from drifts. It might be passable with the right vehicle." Daniel was already reaching for his phone. "I'll call a car service with 4-wheel drive." "That won't work," I interrupted. "It's private property. The road isn't on GPS. You need permission and gate access." "Then who?" "I can get you access," I said simply. Rebecca's eyes narrowed with suspicion. "How?" This was the moment Helen and I had planned for, though we never anticipated a blizzard would deliver it so perfectly. "Because I own it." Silence fell over my kitchen, broken only by the distant sound of melting snow dripping from the eaves. "You." "What?" Rebecca finally managed. "The Pine Haven property on Whitefish Bay. It borders Crescent Lake to the north. Your father inherited it from his uncle Walter back in the 80s. Daniel's expression transformed from confusion to calculation at breathtaking speed. "That's impossible. That property is worth just over $2 million according to the last assessment," I finished for him. "Yes, I know." Rebecca's face had drained of color. "But you were going to move to a retirement home. You said Gerald left you just enough for repairs." "I never said that. You assumed it." I rose and went to the hall closet, returning with a folder of documents. "Here's the deed, the most recent survey, and the property tax statements." They passed the papers between them, their expressions shifting between shock and disbelief. "The cabin itself is modest," I continued casually. "But it sits on 12 acres with 800 feet of lakefront. The rental income goes into a separate account I use for maintenance and improvements." Daniel found his voice first. "Why? Didn't you tell us about this?" "Why would I? It wasn't relevant to our relationship." I met Rebecca's eyes directly. A mother shouldn't have to prove her worth to her daughter with a balance sheet. Rebecca had the grace to look ashamed, if only briefly. So, Daniel cleared his throat, businessman mode reactivating. About that access road. I'll call my property manager to clear it and meet you at the gate, I said. He has a snowplow attachment for his truck. But first, we need to have an honest conversation. For the next hour, we talked more openly than we had in years. I explained that I had no intention of leaving my home, that I was fully capable of managing my affairs, and that I expected to be treated with respect, not as a burden or an obstacle to their ambitions. I don't need your financial support, I told them plainly. What I need is my daughter back, the one who once valued family above profit margins. Rebecca's eyes filled with tears for the first time. Mom, I didn't realize. With Dad gone, I thought you needed us to take control. Daniel and I just wanted to make sure you were taken care of. By taking my home for your development project? I asked gently. Her silence was answer enough. The property at Whitefish Bay, Daniel interjected, unable to resist. Have you considered its development potential? The return could be… Daniel. Rebecca cut him off sharply. Not now. To my surprise, he backed down, looking properly chastened. I made the call to my property manager, who confirmed he could. Clear the access road within 2 hours. While we waited, an uncomfortable truce settled over the house. Rebecca helped me wash the breakfast dishes, something she hadn't done in years, while Daniel made calls to reschedule their presentation for later that evening. As promised, the property manager called when the road was cleared. I handed Rebecca a set of keys I'd kept in Gerald's desk. The gate code is 1978, I told her. The year you were born. Something flickered in her eyes. Recognition. Remembrance of the mother I had always been. The cabin will be cold, I continued. Thermostat is by the kitchen door. There's firewood on the back porch. The investors won't expect luxury accommodations given the weather emergency. You're not coming with us? She asked, sounding genuinely surprised. No, this is your business opportunity. I'm staying here in my home, where I belong. Before they left, Rebecca hugged me awkwardly, whispering, I'm sorry, Mom, for everything. It wasn't enough, not yet, but it was a beginning. After they drove away in my Subaru, Daniel had insisted on renting a luxury SUV once they reached Crescent Lake. I called Helen with an update. Perfect timing, she chuckled. The blizzard was divine intervention. Maybe, I said, watching. The sun glint off the snow-covered trees. Or maybe just a reminder that some forces are beyond our control. Do you think this experience changed anything? She asked. Time will tell. At least now they know I won't be pushed around. 3. Days later, Rebecca called. Their presentation had gone exceptionally well, partly because they were the only developers who managed to reach the investors during the storm. The exclusivity of arriving via private access had impressed everyone involved. The investors want to see the entire area, she said hesitantly, including your property. They're wondering if the parcels could be developed together. I took a deep breath. My property isn't for sale, Rebecca. I know, Mom. I told them that. She paused. Actually, I told them it belongs to my mother, who taught me the value of holding on to what matters, and that some things aren't for sale at any price. For the first time in too long, I heard sincerity in my daughter's voice. The following. Weekend, Rebecca came alone. No Daniel, no paperwork, no agenda. She brought homemade soup, admittedly purchased from the gourmet market, but it was the thought that counted, and sat with me looking through old photo albums. We talked about Gerald, about her childhood, about what we both wanted for the future. I don't think I ever thanked you, she said as evening fell, for coming to get us during the blizzard. After how we treated you, you would have been justified in leaving us stranded. That's not how family works, I replied simply. She nodded, understanding beginning to dawn. I'm learning that, again. It wasn't perfect reconciliation, but it was a start. The lakefront property had opened her eyes, but I hoped something more important was happening. She was beginning to see me, her mother, not as an asset or liability, but as a person deserving of dignity and respect. As for Daniel, he still occasionally mentions development opportunities, but the predatory gleam has faded from his eyes. Knowledge of my financial independence changed the power balance permanently. Last month, I invited them to spend a weekend at the lake cabin, not for business, but for family time. To my surprise, they accepted. Watching Rebecca skip stones across the water like she did as a child, I realized that sometimes your ground isn't about winning a battle, but about creating space for something better to grow. The snow that had nearly separated us forever had melted long ago, but its lesson remained crystal clear. True wealth isn't measured in property values or investment portfolios, but in relationships strong enough to weather any storm. 2 weeks passed after my confrontation with Rebecca and Daniel. The snow had melted into dirty slush piles along the roadways, and life had seemingly returned to normal. But the fragile peace wouldn't last. I should have known better. I was tending to my African violets in the sunroom when my doorbell rang. The clock on the wall read 10:15 a.m., too early for mail delivery, too late for newspaper collection. When I opened the door, I found not Rebecca or Daniel, but a professional-looking woman in her 30s clutching a leather portfolio. Mrs. Wilson? Martha Wilson? Her smile was practiced, pleasant without warmth. I'm Vanessa Clark from Sunset. Transitions. Your daughter scheduled a home evaluation today? I gripped the doorframe, momentarily speechless. I'm sorry. What kind of evaluation? Vanessa consulted her tablet. Senior Transition Services. We help families organize, downsize, and prepare homes for sale while coordinating moves to retirement. Communities. Her eyes were already scanning my entryway, mentally cataloging the furniture. The appointment was set for 10:00. I'm running a bit behind. Hope that's not an issue. My chest tightened. So this was Rebecca's new approach, bypassing my refusal by bringing in professionals to pressure me. There's been a misunderstanding, I said firmly. I haven't agreed to any evaluation. My daughter made this appointment without my knowledge or consent. Vanessa's smile faltered. Oh, well, this is awkward. She lowered her voice as if sharing a confidence. This happens sometimes. Family members often have different timelines for these transitions. Perhaps I could just do a quick walkthrough while I'm here? No obligation. No, thank you. I stood my ground, remembering Helen's advice to be direct. I'm not selling my home or moving to a retirement community. My daughter doesn't speak for me in these matters. Something flickered across Vanessa's face, annoyance briefly masquerading as concern. Mrs. Wilson, I understand this is difficult. Change is scary at any age, but especially, it's not about fear, I interrupted. It's about autonomy. I'm perfectly capable of making my own decisions about where and how I live. She tried once, more. Your daughter mentioned safety concerns. My daughter is mistaken. Thank you for your time, Ms. Clark. I closed the door gently but firmly, then leaned against it, my heart pounding. The audacity was breathtaking. Rebecca hadn't even mentioned this appointment. I had barely collected myself when my phone rang. Rebecca. Mom, Vanessa should be there by now. She'll help you sort through. She was here, I said, keeping my voice steady despite my anger. I sent her away. A beat of silence. You what? Rebecca, we've discussed this. I'm not selling my home. You had no right to send someone here, without even telling me. Mom, be reasonable. Vanessa is a professional. She could have helped you see how much better off you'd be. By pressuring me into a decision I've already clearly rejected? I could hear my voice rising and took a deep breath. This has to stop, Rebecca. I will not be manipulated. It's not manipulation. It's caring. Why can't you understand we're trying to help? If you truly want to help, you could start by respecting my decisions. Rebecca's voice hardened. This isn't just about you, Mom. That property is part of our family legacy. Dad would have wanted it put to good use, not sitting there deprecating while you stubbornly cling to the past. The mention of Gerald sent a fresh wave of pain through me. Don't you dare presume to know what your father would have wanted, I said quietly. Gerald believed in respecting people's choices. He never would have forced anyone, especially me, into a life they didn't choose. Well, he's not here, Rebecca snapped, and someone needs to make practical decisions before… She stopped abruptly. Before what, Rebecca? Become completely senile? Die and leave you with a mess to clean up? Please finish your thought. This isn't productive, she muttered. We'll talk later when you're being more reasonable. The line went dead. I set the phone down with trembling hands. The conversation had confirmed my worst fears. This wasn't about my well-being at all. It was about my property, about what they considered their legacy, as if I were merely a temporary caretaker of assets they already viewed as rightfully theirs. I called Helen immediately. She listened to my account of the morning's events with growing concern. This is escalating, Martha, she said. Rebecca's bringing in third parties now. Next, it could be a doctor to evaluate your cognitive capacity or worse. She wouldn't do that, I protested, though uncertainty colored my voice. Are you sure? A week ago, would you have believed she'd send a stranger to evaluate your home without permission? Helen's practical tone left no room for sentimentality. We need to accelerate our plans. Following her advice, I spent the afternoon making appointments with my primary care physician for a comprehensive cognitive assessment, which I passed with flying colors, with my bank to update account access protocols, and most importantly, with Helen's former law partner who specialized in elder rights. That evening, I unearthed dusty photo albums from the attic. Page after page documented Rebecca's childhood, Gerald teaching her to ride a bike, family vacations at the lake cabin, her high school graduation with both of us beaming beside her. When had things changed so dramatically? When had I transformed? In her eyes from mother to obstacle? I paused at a photo taken about 5 years ago, shortly before Gerald's diagnosis. We were celebrating Rebecca's promotion at the real estate firm where she'd met Daniel. Her smile was radiant, genuine. We'd been close then. She'd called me almost daily, asking advice about office politics or seeking reassurance when deals fell through. Had Daniel's influence changed her, or had the seeds always been there, dormant until opportunity watered them? I couldn't be sure. The next morning brought unexpected sunshine, both literal and figurative. I was surprised to find Rebecca on my doorstep, alone, bearing a peace offering of fresh bagels and coffee. Mom, I'm sorry about yesterday, she said, seeming genuinely contrite. I should have talked to you first about Vanessa. Cautiously, I invited her in. We settled at the kitchen table, the familiar ritual of sharing breakfast temporarily bridging the chasm between us. I've been thinking about what you said, she continued, spreading cream cheese on a bagel. About respecting your decisions. Hope flickered within me. I appreciate that, sweetheart. I still worry about you here alone, but maybe we approached it all wrong. She sipped her coffee, hesitating before continuing. What if, instead of selling, we consider alternatives? You could keep the house but move into a senior apartment temporarily. Just winters, perhaps, when maintenance is hardest. It wasn't a complete surrender, but it was the first compromise she'd offered. I considered her words carefully. That's not unreasonable, I acknowledged. Seasonal arrangements do make sense for some people. Rebecca brightened, encouraged by my response. Exactly. You'd have the best of both worlds. And maybe Daniel and I could help with upgrades to make the house safer and more efficient when you are here. The conversation felt almost normal. like we were problem-solving together rather than battling for control. For the first time in weeks, I glimpsed my daughter beneath the ambitious real estate developer she'd become. "I'd be open to discussing safety modifications," I said carefully. "The bathroom could use updated grab bars, and better outdoor lighting would help during winter evenings." "We could start there," Rebecca agreed, her relief palpable. "No pressure about moving, just practical improvements." We spent an hour walking through the house, identifying potential updates. Rebecca took notes on her phone, occasionally snapping photos of areas needing attention. It felt collaborative rather than invasive. Perhaps we were finding middle ground after all. As she prepared to leave, Rebecca hugged me, a real embrace, not the perfunctory gesture she'd offered in recent months. "I'm sorry things got so tense," she murmured against my shoulder. "I do want what's best for you, Mom." "I know, sweetheart." And in that moment, I believed her. After she left, I called Helen to report this unexpected development. "It sounds promising," she agreed, though her tone held reservation. "Just don't let your guard down completely. Keep our appointments with the lawyer and doctor." "You think it's an act?" I asked, suddenly uncertain. "Not necessarily. Rebecca might genuinely feel remorseful, but Daniel's influence concerns me. Helen had always been perceptive about people. Just proceed with caution." Her warning proved prescient sooner than either of us expected. 3 days later, a contractor's truck pulled into my driveway unannounced. 2 men in work clothes approached my door carrying toolboxes. "Mrs. Wilson, we're from Pioneer Home Services," the older man explained. "Your son-in-law scheduled a renovation consultation." Again, no prior discussion with me. No respect for my autonomy. The realization that Rebecca's apparent change of heart had been merely a tactical shift, gathering information about my home under the guise of concern, felt like a physical blow. "I didn't authorize any renovations," I told them firmly. The men exchanged uncomfortable glances. "Ma'am, we have a signed work order for a bathroom remodel starting next week. Materials have been ordered. By Daniel Pierce, he has no authority to commission work on my property. The paperwork has both his signature and Rebecca Wilson Pierce as homeowners," the younger man said, checking a document on his tablet. Ice flooded my veins. They had misrepresented themselves as owners of my home. This wasn't just pushy, it was potentially fraudulent. "I'm Martha Wilson," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I am the sole owner of this property. Whatever paperwork you have is incorrect." After an awkward exchange, the contractors left, promising to contact Daniel for clarification. Once alone, I sank into my armchair, physically shaking with anger and betrayal. The bagels and coffee, the collaborative planning session, all of it a ruse to assess what renovations they could justify imposing. I called Rebecca immediately. She answered on the 4th ring, her voice carefully neutral. "What contractors did Daniel send to my house?" I demanded, bypassing pleasantries. A hesitation. "Mom, we discussed improvements. We discussed possibilities. I never authorized anyone to begin work or order materials." My voice rose despite my efforts to remain calm. "And I certainly never gave either of you permission to represent yourselves as the property owners." "That must be a misunderstanding," Rebecca said quickly. "Daniel probably just used our company account to get a better rate. These contractors know us professionally." "The men specifically said the paperwork listed you both as homeowners." Another pause. "I'll talk to Daniel about it." "This isn't just about miscommunication, Rebecca. This is misrepresentation, possibly fraud." "Mom!" Her voice sharpened. "That's a serious accusation. We're trying to help make your home safer. Why are you fighting us on every single thing?" "Because you're not listening. You're not respecting my boundaries or my ownership rights." "Ownership rights," she repeated bitterly. "Is that all you care about? Your precious house?" The irony was staggering. That's rich coming from the person trying to force me out or take control of my property. You know what? Fine. Live alone in your deteriorating house. Fall in the shower with no one to help you. Is that what you want? What I want is my daughter back, I said quietly. The one who respected me as a person, not just an obstacle to inheritance. Rebecca was silent for several seconds. You've changed since Dad died, she finally said, her voice cold. You've become paranoid, suspicious. Maybe you do need a medical evaluation. The threat was thinly veiled. I ended the call before saying something I might regret, then immediately called Helen, who listened with mounting alarm. Martha, this is serious, she said. Misrepresenting themselves as property owners crosses a line. We need to accelerate our timeline. What timeline? I asked, confused. For revealing your financial position. They clearly believe you're vulnerable, both emotionally and financially. That perception is driving their behavior. You think I should tell them about the lakefront property now? Helen hesitated. Not yet. But we need stronger legal protections. In place immediately. I'll call Edward at the firm. He can see you this afternoon. By sunset, I had signed documentation firmly establishing a revocable trust for my assets, including both properties. The trust included incapacity provisions that would prevent Rebecca or Daniel from gaining control through claims about my mental fitness. Edward, Helen's former colleague, also drafted a stern cease and desist letter regarding any unauthorized work or misrepresentation of my property ownership. We won't send this yet, he explained, but it's ready if needed. Sometimes just knowing consequences exist is enough deterrent. That evening, I sat on my back porch watching twilight settle over the garden Gerald had loved so dearly. Daffodils were pushing through the soil where he'd planted hundreds of bulbs in his final autumn, determined to leave beauty behind. So you'll remember to look forward to spring, he'd told me, his breath labored from exertion. I wondered what advice he would offer now. Gerald had always seen the best in Rebecca, even when her ambition occasionally overshadowed her compassion. She's driven, he'd say with paternal pride. Just like you were at her age. But even he would struggle to justify her recent behavior. The doorbell rang, startling me from my reverie. Through the security peephole, I was surprised to see Daniel alone on my porch, his expression uncharacteristically contrite. Against my better judgment, I opened the door. Martha, he began immediately, I owe you an apology about the contractors. There was a miscommunication in the paperwork. Misrepresentation, not miscommunication, I corrected, standing firmly in the doorway without inviting him in. He winced. Fair enough. It was wrong, and I've canceled the work order. He held up his phone, showing an email confirmation of cancellation. Rebecca doesn't know I'm here. That surprised me. Why the secret visit? Daniel shifted uncomfortably. Because I think we've handled this whole situation badly. Rebecca is struggling. She won't admit it, but losing Gerald hit her harder than she shows. In her mind, making sure you're taken care of is something she promised him. The mention of a promise to Gerald caught me off guard. She never mentioned that. It was during his final days, Daniel explained, his usual corporate polish temporarily absent. She told him she'd make sure you were never alone or in need. I think she's interpreting that promise very literally, equating your independence with failing him somehow. I studied Daniel's face, searching for signs of manipulation. He seemed genuinely concerned, though whether for Rebecca or for salvaging. Their plans, I couldn't be certain. Why are you telling me this now? Because she came home crying yesterday after your phone call. Said she was losing you too. He met my eyes directly. Martha, we've approached this all wrong. The aggressive tactics, the pressure, it's not working and it's destroying your relationship with Rebecca. Despite my suspicions, his words resonated with my deepest fear. losing my daughter completely over this conflict. "What exactly are you proposing?" I asked cautiously. "A reset. No more talk about selling or moving. No renovations without your explicit approval. Just family dinners, regular visits, rebuilding trust." It sounded reasonable. Too reasonable from the man who weeks earlier had dismissed my autonomy without a second thought. And the development plans for my neighborhood, the investment opportunity my property represents, have those magically disappeared? I couldn't keep the skepticism from my voice. Daniel had the grace to look uncomfortable. "Business is business, Martha. Yes, your property has development potential. Yes, our company is interested in the neighborhood. But we can separate that from family matters." "Can you? Can Rebecca?" I pressed. "We can try," he offered, which was perhaps the most honest thing he'd said yet. I considered his words carefully. "I appreciate the gesture, Daniel. But trust is earned, not declared. Actions, not promises, will determine where we go from here." He nodded, accepting this partial truce. "Fair enough. How about Sunday dinner? Here or at our place, whichever you prefer." "Here," I said firmly. 6 o'clock. After he left, I called Helen again, recounting the unexpected visit. "It could be genuine," she acknowledged. "Or it could be a tactical retreat, realizing forcing you isn't working, so they're trying a softer approach. Either way, a cooling off period seems wise," I reasoned, "and Sunday dinner gives me an opportunity to assess whether Rebecca truly wants reconciliation." "Just remember everything we've put in place legally," Helen cautioned. "Don't sign anything, no matter how casual it seems." Sunday arrived crisp and clear, early spring sunshine bathing the neighborhood in golden light. I spent the morning baking Gerald's favorite lemon pound cake, Rebecca's favorite too, though she'd probably deny the sentimental attachment now. The familiar rhythm of measuring, mixing, and timing provided a meditative calm I desperately needed. At precisely 6, my doorbell rang. Rebecca and Daniel stood on the porch, she clutching a bouquet of tulips, he balancing a bottle of wine. Their expressions were caught between determination and uncertainty, like actors who had memorized their lines but remained unsure of their motivation. "These are beautiful," I said, accepting the flowers. "Thank you." Rebecca's smile seemed genuine, if tentative. "I remembered you always planted tulips along the front walk." "Your father's influence," I acknowledged, stepping aside to let them enter. "He believed in celebrating spring as dramatically as possible." A flicker of sadness crossed Rebecca's face at the mention of Gerald. Not the performative grief she sometimes displayed at family gatherings, but something more authentic. Dinner progressed with surprising smoothness. We avoided contentious topics, instead discussing neutral subjects. A documentary series Rebecca had been watching, Daniel's brother's new baby, my garden club's upcoming plant sale. For brief stretches, it almost felt like family again. As I served coffee and cake, Rebecca's demeanor shifted subtly. She placed her fork down without tasting the dessert, her posture straightening into what I recognized as her business meeting stance. "Mom," she began, her tone carefully modulated, "I want to apologize properly for how we've handled things. The senior living suggestions, the contractors. It was too much, too fast, without enough consideration for your feelings." It sounded rehearsed but not insincere. I nodded, acknowledging her words without immediately absolving her. "The truth is," she continued, "I worry about you being alone. After what happened to Mrs. Harmon next door?" "Margaret Harmon fell because she was mixing medications," I interjected. "That has nothing to do with living independently." "I know, but—" "Rebecca," I said gently, "I understand concern. What I don't understand is the leap from concern to control." Daniel shifted uncomfortably beside her. Rebecca pressed on. "You're right. crossed boundaries. She took a deep breath. So I have a new proposal. No pressure, just an option to consider. I raised an eyebrow, waiting. There's a new development called Willow Creek Cottages about 15 minutes from our place. They're independent living homes, actual small houses with full kitchens, private yards, but within a community that offers optional services like maintenance and security. It was a more reasonable suggestion than Morningside Village had been, but still presumed my willingness to leave my home. I appreciate the thought, I said carefully, but I'm not interested in moving. Just visit the model home, Rebecca urged. It's beautiful, modern, accessible design, but with character. Nothing institutional about it. Rebecca? Mom, please, just look. If you hate it, I promise I'll drop the subject completely. I studied my daughter's face, trying to discern her true motivation. Was this genuinely about finding a compromise, or just another angle of approach toward the same goal? One visit, I finally agreed. No paperwork, no commitments, no pressure afterward. Relief spread across her features. Thank you, that's all I'm asking. The remainder of the evening passed pleasantly enough. As they prepared to leave, Rebecca embraced me with what felt like genuine warmth. I miss you, Mom, she whispered. I miss how things used to be between us. The simple admission caught me off guard, vulnerability breaking through her professional veneer. For a moment, I glimpsed my little girl again, the one who had once climbed into my lap after scraping her knee, seeking comfort and reassurance. I miss you too, sweetheart, I replied softly. After they left, I sat alone in my living room, emotions swirling like autumn leaves in a whirlwind. Part of me wanted desperately to believe in Rebecca's apparent change of heart. Another part remained, vigilant, wary of manipulation dressed as concern. The proposed visit to Willow Creek Cottages took place the following Saturday. The development was admittedly lovely. Thoughtfully designed homes with universal accessibility features seamlessly integrated into attractive architecture. Nothing about the place screamed senior housing, and residents appeared active and engaged, tending gardens or chatting with neighbors. What do you think? Rebecca asked eagerly as we toured a model unit. The primary bedroom has a zero-step shower, and look, the kitchen counters are adjustable height. It's very well designed, I acknowledged, running my hand along a beautifully crafted maple countertop. I can see the appeal for many people. But not for you, she concluded, disappointment evident in her voice. I turned to face her directly. Rebecca, this isn't about the quality of the housing. These are beautiful homes in a lovely community. Then what's holding you back? Choice, I said simply. My home isn't just a structure. It's 40 years of memories, of life with your father, of raising you. It's my garden where I know every plant's history. It's familiar creeks and sounds that comfort me at night. But beyond that, I continued gently, it's about autonomy, about making my own decisions rather than having others decide what's best for me. Rebecca's expression faltered between frustration and reluctant understanding. I just want you to be safe. I know, and I appreciate that concern. But safety isn't just physical. It's also emotional, psychological. Being forced from my home would damage that sense of security far more than living independently. She nodded slowly, though I could tell my resistance still frustrated her. Will you at least keep it as an option for the future? I can do that, I conceded. If circumstances change substantially, I promise to reconsider appropriate alternatives. It wasn't the enthusiastic embrace of her plan that Rebecca had hoped for, but she accepted this. Compromise with reasonable grace. On the drive home, our conversation turned to lighter topics. Community events, a new restaurant she'd tried, my upcoming garden club presentation on heirloom roses. For the next 2 weeks, an uneasy peace prevailed. Rebecca called regularly, our conversations carefully navigating around contentious subjects. Daniel sent a handyman to fix my leaking kitchen faucet, with my prior permission notably. Small gestures of reconciliation accumulated like the first tentative snowflakes of winter. I began to lower my guard, hoping we might actually be finding our way back to a healthier relationship. Helen remained skeptical, but even she acknowledged the positive shift in dynamics. Just maintain boundaries, she advised during our weekly lunch. Reconciliation doesn't mean capitulation. I was still basking in cautious optimism when everything shattered on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. I had just returned from a doctor's appointment, a routine checkup that had gone perfectly well, when I noticed an unfamiliar car in my driveway. A silver sedan with a discreet magnetic sign on the door. Comprehensive Senior Evaluations. Approaching my front door, I found a middle-aged man in a blazer conversing with Rebecca on my porch. She froze when she saw me, guilt flashing across her face like lightning. "Mom, you're home early. I thought your appointment was until 3. The doctor was running ahead of schedule, I replied coolly, my gaze shifting between her and the stranger. "What's going on here?" The man extended his hand professionally. "Mrs. Wilson, I'm Dr. Gabriel Mercer. I'm here to conduct a home safety and cognitive evaluation." My blood ran cold. "Cognitive evaluation?" Rebecca jumped in quickly. "It's just a standard assessment, Mom, for insurance purposes, to make sure I'm not losing my mind," I finished for her, anger rising like floodwater. "To build a case that I'm incompetent to manage my affairs?" Dr. Mercer had the grace to look uncomfortable. "Mrs. Wilson, these evaluations are quite routine. Many families find them reassuring." "I haven't consented to any evaluation," I stated firmly, "and I'd like you to leave my property immediately." He glanced at Rebecca, who had paled considerably. "Perhaps we should reschedule when—" "There will be no rescheduling," I interrupted. "My daughter has no authority to arrange cognitive evaluations without my consent." After an awkward moment, Dr. Mercer nodded, handed Rebecca a business card, and retreated to his vehicle. I unlocked my front door without looking at my daughter, my hands trembling with suppressed rage and disappointment. "Mom, please," Rebecca followed me inside. "It's not what you think." I turned to face her, no longer bothering to mask my hurt. "Then what is it, Rebecca? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you arranged for a stranger to evaluate my mental competence behind my back, while pretending to respect my autonomy." "It's just a precaution," she insisted. "The insurance company recommended—" "What insurance company? I haven't changed my policy," she faltered. The company we were considering for the cottage at Willow Creek. They offer a discount if—" "Stop lying to me," I said quietly. "There is no insurance requirement. You're building a case to challenge my competence, to take control of my property and my life." "That's not true." But her eyes slid away from mine, confirmation in her avoidance. "I saw the paperwork in his hand, Rebecca. Capacity evaluation for guardianship consideration. Do you think I'm blind as well as senile?" Her composure cracked. "Mom, you're being so stubborn about everything. We're trying to help you. Dad would have wanted—" "Don't you dare invoke your father in this scheme," I said, my voice dangerously soft. "Gerald believed in dignity and respect. He would be ashamed of these tactics." Rebecca's face flushed with anger and embarrassment. "You're twisting everything. Daniel and I are looking out for your best interests. Someone has to make practical decisions before— Before what? Before I die and you lose your chance at my property? Is that what this is really about? God, Mom, not everything is about your precious house. Then why the obsession with moving me out of it? Why the contractors presenting themselves as owners? Why the cognitive evaluation that could lead to declaring me incompetent?" Rebecca had no answer, her silence more damning than any protestation could have been. "I think you should leave," I said finally. and I think we need some distance while I reconsider our relationship." "Mom." "I mean it, Rebecca, go." After she left, I called Helen in tears, the betrayal cutting deeper than I'd anticipated. After 5 years of widowhood, I'd thought I understood loneliness. But this deliberate undermining by my only child, introduced me to an entirely new dimension of isolation. Helen arrived within the hour, her practical nature temporarily set aside as she wrapped me in a fierce hug. "I'm so sorry, Martha," she murmured. "You didn't deserve this." "What kind of daughter arranges a cognitive evaluation without even discussing it?" I asked, my voice breaking. "Am I so unreasonable that this seemed necessary?" Helen guided me to the sofa, keeping one arm around my shoulders. "This isn't about you being unreasonable. It's about control. Rebecca and Daniel have convinced themselves they know what's best, and they're willing to use any means to achieve it. Including having me declared incompetent," I said bitterly. "Which would never succeed," Helen assured me. "You've had a complete medical workup showing you're perfectly sharp. We've established the trust with ironclad capacity provisions. They're grasping at straws." "It's not even about the legal ramifications," I admitted, wiping away tears. "It's the betrayal, the sneaking around, the lies." Helen nodded, understanding the deeper wound. "What do you want to do now?" I considered the question carefully, emotions gradually settling into clarity. "I need to protect myself, not just legally, but emotionally. I can't keep riding this roller coaster of reconciliation and betrayal." "Distance might be wise," Helen agreed. "Give yourself space to heal. And I need to be completely transparent about my financial situation," I continued, conviction growing. "No more secrets. If Rebecca and Daniel are motivated by belief that I'm financially vulnerable, that misperception needs correction." "The lakefront property reveal?" "Yes, but not as a gotcha moment, as simple clarity about where things stand." Helen squeezed my hand supportively. "When?" "Soon," I decided. "But first, I need time to process this betrayal and decide what kind of relationship, if any, I want moving forward." The rain outside intensified, drumming against the windows like nature's percussion accompanying my grief. For the first time since Gerald's death, I allowed myself to face the possibility that my relationship with Rebecca might be permanently damaged. Not just strained, but fundamentally broken. "What if this can't be fixed?" I whispered, voicing my deepest fear. Helen's answer was gentle but unflinching. "Then you'll grieve that loss too, Martha. And you'll continue building a life filled with people who respect and value you. Family isn't just blood. Sometimes it's the people who treat us with dignity when we're most vulnerable." As dusk settled over my neighborhood, I realized Helen was right. Whatever came next with Rebecca, reconciliation or permanent estrangement, I would face it from a position of strength and self-respect. The fragile older woman they'd tried to label me as didn't exist. In her place stood someone far stronger, a woman who had loved and lost, who had built a life of meaning, and who would not surrender her autonomy to anyone, even those she loved most dearly. The storm outside my windows would eventually pass. And so would this one. Whether Rebecca would remain in my life afterward remained to be seen. 3 days passed without a word from Rebecca. No apologetic phone calls, no text messages, no surprise visits with peace offerings. The silence was both a relief and a fresh wound, confirmation that when confronted directly about her manipulative behavior, she had no genuine defense to offer. I spent those quiet days reorganizing Gerald's office, a task I'd avoided since his passing. Each folder and notebook contained echoes of his methodical mind, financial records meticulously maintained, property documents arranged by acquisition, date, investments tracked with precise notations. Among these papers, I discovered something unexpected. A sealed envelope addressed to Rebecca, dated just 2 weeks before his death. My hands trembled as I held it. Gerald had never mentioned writing a letter to our daughter. Had he asked me to deliver it, and I'd forgotten in the fog of grief? Or had he tucked it away deliberately, perhaps waiting for a moment when she might need his guidance most? I placed the envelope in my bedside drawer, uncertain whether to forward it immediately or wait for some resolution in our current conflict. The discovery left me feeling both comforted by Gerald's foresight and melancholy at this newfound connection to him. On the 4th day, my phone rang just after breakfast. Not Rebecca, but Daniel. "Martha," he began without preamble, "this has gone far enough." Rebecca's devastated. I took a measured breath. "Good morning to you too, Daniel. Look, I understand you're upset about the evaluation, but Rebecca was just being thorough. Insurance companies—" "Please stop," I interrupted. "We both know there was no insurance requirement. The cognitive assessment was arranged to build a case for guardianship." A telling pause. "That's not—" he started, then recalibrated. "Martha, regardless of how you're interpreting events, the fact remains that Rebecca is heartbroken. She believes you've cut her out of your life." I asked for space to process a significant betrayal, I clarified. That's not the same as cutting someone out permanently. Daniel's voice hardened. "Space, time. Whatever you want to call it, it's cruel to leave her hanging like this. She's your daughter." "Yes, she is," I agreed, which makes her actions all the more painful. "So, what now? What's your endgame here? Making her suffer indefinitely?" The question startled me. This isn't about punishment, Daniel. It's about boundaries and trust. Both have been repeatedly violated. "People make mistakes," he countered. "Families forgive. Forgiveness doesn't preclude consequences or necessary distance." Daniel sighed dramatically. "Rebecca's birthday dinner is Saturday. The family's gathering at Veritas Restaurant downtown. She wants you there." The sudden shift to social obligation caught me off guard. Rebecca's birthday. I hadn't forgotten the date, but in the midst of our conflict, I hadn't considered celebration. Plans. "I'm not sure that's wise right now," I said carefully. "Things are still raw between us." "It's her birthday, Martha. Are you really going to punish her by not showing up? What kind of mother does that?" The guilt manipulation was so transparent I almost laughed. The kind who's been repeatedly deceived by her daughter, most recently through an attempt to question her mental competence. "For God's sake," Daniel snapped, professional veneer cracking. "Let it go. Come to dinner. Act like a mother for once." The unfairness of his accusation stung sharply. "I've been acting like a mother for 37 years, Daniel. What I won't act like is a doormat." "Fine," he bit out. "I'll tell Rebecca you refused. That should make for a happy birthday." "Tell her whatever you wish," I replied evenly. "But if you're interested in accuracy, tell her I need more time before social gatherings are appropriate, and that when she's ready for an honest conversation, without manipulation, without ulterior motives, I'll be here." After hanging up, I sat in my kitchen, heart racing despite my outward composure. Daniel's call had been a clumsy attempt at emotional leverage, but that didn't make it entirely ineffective. The thought of Rebecca celebrating her birthday without me created a hollow ache in my chest. For 37 years, I'd marked each of her birthdays with carefully selected gifts, homemade cakes, and heartfelt cards. Even after she'd moved out, we'd maintained the tradition of birthday dinners, just the two of us initially, then including Gerald, and later Daniel. The idea of breaking this continuity, regardless of justification, felt like severing another thread in our already fraying relationship. I called Helen, seeking her level-headed perspective. "Of course they're using her birthday as leverage," she confirmed after hearing about Daniel's call. "It's a public setting where you'd feel pressured to maintain appearances. Classic manipulation. Tactic." But refusing to attend makes me the villain in their narrative, I pointed out. Martha, you need to decide whether you're making decisions based on their potential narrative or your actual well-being. Helen's practical tone was exactly what I needed. Would attending this dinner be healthy for you right now? I considered the question honestly. No, it would be performative and tense. Then don't go. Send a card and gift if you feel that's appropriate, but protect your emotional health. After our call, I selected a birthday card from my stationery collection. Not the humorous one I'd purchased months earlier, but a simple, elegant design with minimal text. Inside, I wrote, "Rebecca, wishing you joy on your birthday. When you're ready for an honest conversation about recent events, I'm here. With love, Mom." I enclosed a gift certificate to her favorite bookstore. Impersonal, perhaps, but appropriate, given our current distance. After addressing the envelope, I drove to the post office rather than leaving it in my mailbox for pickup. The small errand provided purpose, a concrete action amid emotional uncertainty. On Rebecca's birthday, I received a text message from an unexpected source, her husband. The tersely worded note included a photo of Rebecca at the restaurant, surrounded by friends and colleagues, smiling for the camera with a champagne glass raised. "She's having a wonderful time despite your absence. Just thought you should know." The transparent attempt to provoke guilt might have worked weeks earlier. Now it merely confirmed my decision to maintain distance had been correct. I deleted the message without responding. That evening, alone in my living room with a cup of tea and a novel I couldn't focus on, I found myself thinking about the letter from Gerald I'd discovered. What wisdom or comfort might it contain? Would his words offer some path through this painful impasse with our daughter? After retrieving the envelope from my bedside drawer, I sat holding it for several long minutes, torn between respecting its intended recipient and my desperate need for connection to Gerald's perspective. Eventually, I returned it unopened to the drawer. Whatever message he'd left for Rebecca belonged to her, regardless of our current conflict. The following Tuesday brought unexpected clarity in the form of a certified letter from a law firm I didn't recognize. My hands trembled slightly as I signed for the envelope, mind racing through possibilities, none of them positive. Inside was a formal notice informing me that Rebecca and Daniel Pierce had petitioned for guardianship evaluation, citing concerns about my declining capacity to manage personal and financial affairs, and resistance to appropriate care arrangements. The document included a court date scheduled 3 weeks hence and advised me to secure legal representation. For several minutes, I sat motionless at my kitchen table, the official language blurring before my eyes as shock gave way to a cold, clarifying anger. This wasn't just boundary crossing or manipulation. This was a legal attempt to strip me of autonomy, to declare me incompetent despite all evidence to the contrary. With steadier hands than I would have expected, I called Helen, then Edward, the elder law attorney who had established my trust. Within hours, both had arrived at my home, reviewing the petition with expressions that shifted from concern to outrage. "This is absurd," Edward muttered, scanning the document. "They have no grounds whatsoever. Your medical evaluations are pristine. There's no evidence of financial mismanagement. This is nothing but an attempt to gain control of your assets." "Can they do this?" I asked. "Just file a petition with no legitimate basis?" "Anyone can file," he explained grimly. "Getting it approved is another matter, but the process itself can be intrusive and stressful for the subject, which may be part of their strategy," Helen added. "Wear you down through legal pressure." Edward nodded agreement. "Fortunately, we've already established the trust with capacity provisions specifically to prevent this type of maneuver. And your recent medical documentation creates a strong presumption of competence." "So we fight," I said, more statement than question. "Absolutely, and with appropriate countermeasures." Edward's expression shifted to one of professional determination. First, we'll file a motion to dismiss based on recently documented capacity. Second, we'll request sanctions for frivolous filing. Third, and this may be most important, we need to address the property motivation directly. The lakefront revelation, Helen interjected. Precisely, Edward agreed. Nothing undermines a financial motive faster than demonstrating that the supposedly vulnerable party has substantial undisclosed assets and excellent financial management. The strategy made logical sense, yet something within me hesitated. This feels so adversarial. She's still my daughter. Edward's expression softened slightly. Martha, I understand this is painful, but Rebecca and Daniel initiated legal proceedings against you. They've moved this beyond family disagreement into potential legal guardianship. We need to respond accordingly. He's right, Helen added gently. This isn't about punishing Rebecca. It's about protecting yourself. By evening, Edward had drafted responses to the petition and outlined our counter-strategies. The immediate legal danger appeared manageable, but the emotional landscape felt irreparably altered. My daughter had taken formal steps to have me declared incompetent, a boundary crossing so profound I struggled to envision any path back to normal relations. That night, sleep proved elusive. I paced my bedroom, pausing occasionally at the window to gaze at the waning moon suspended above my backyard. The garden Gerald had lovingly tended now flourished under my care, spring bulbs emerging in cheerful defiance of winter's lingering chill. Like those persistent flowers, I too would continue growing despite harsh conditions. By morning, I had reached a decision. The legal response would proceed as Edward recommended, but I would take one additional step: direct communication. Not with Rebecca initially, but with Daniel, the apparent architect of this guardianship strategy. I waited until business hours, then called his office directly. Martha, his voice registered surprise when his assistant connected us. I didn't expect. I received the guardianship petition, I interrupted, keeping my tone level. We need to talk. In person. Today. A pause. I'm not sure that's advised, given pending legal. This isn't a negotiation, Daniel. Either we meet privately to discuss resolution, or my next conversation is with the partners at your firm about your attempt to declare a mentally competent client incapacitated for financial gain. The threat was calculated. I knew from Gerald's business connections that Daniel's firm had strict ethical guidelines about conflicts of interest. That's unnecessary, he said quickly. We can meet. My office? 3 o'clock? Not your office. The conference room at First Community Bank on Pine Street. 3 o'clock is fine. Martha, what's this about? If you're planning some dramatic... 3 o'clock, Daniel. Come alone. I ended the call, heart-pounding but resolve firm. Immediately, I called Helen, then Edward, informing them of the meeting and my intentions. Neither seemed entirely comfortable with my approach, but both recognized my determination. At least let me accompany you, Helen urged. No, I replied. This needs to be direct, without buffers. But I'd appreciate it if you could meet me afterward. The hours until 3 o'clock passed both too quickly and agonizingly slowly. I selected my outfit carefully, not for vanity, but for the psychological advantage of presentation. The navy pantsuit I chose had been a favorite for parent-teacher conferences during my teaching years, projecting authority and competence without intimidation. Pearl earrings that had been Gerald's first gift to me completed the ensemble. I arrived at the bank 20 minutes early, having arranged access to their client conference room through my long-standing relationship with the manager. The space was perfect for my purposes, neutral territory with the implicit legitimacy of a financial institution. Daniel arrived precisely at 3, expression guarded as he entered the room. His usual confidence seemed diminished, replaced by cautious assessment. Thank you for coming, I began, indicating the chair across from me. What's this about, Martha? He asked, remaining standing. If this is some attempt to resolve the guardianship petition without proper legal channels, please sit down. Daniel. Something in my tone must have registered because he complied, though his posture remained tense. First, I said calmly, I want to ensure we understand each other clearly. The guardianship petition you and Rebecca filed is baseless. My recent medical evaluations confirm cognitive soundness. My financial management is impeccable. Your petition will fail. He opened his mouth to respond, but I raised a hand. I'm not finished. The petition isn't just baseless, it's potentially sanctionable. My attorney is preparing motions accordingly. Martha, you're making this unnecessarily adversarial. We're concerned about my property, I finished for him. Let's be honest, at least in this room, this isn't about my well-being. It's about assets you believe should be under your control. Daniel's expression tightened. That's unfair. Rebecca is genuinely worried about— Perhaps she is, I conceded. But you've encouraged and exploited those concerns to pursue financial objectives. The development potential of my neighborhood, the sale of my home, these are your primary motivations. This conversation isn't productive, he said stiffly, beginning to rise. Sit down, Daniel. We're not done. To my mild surprise, he complied. Again. I've invited you here to offer a resolution that avoids protracted legal conflict, I continued. One that clarifies certain misperceptions that may be driving your actions. From my portfolio, I removed a folder containing documentation of the lakefront property, deed, tax assessments, recent valuation, rental income statements. I placed these documents methodically on the table between us. This is the Pine Haven property on Whitefish Bay, adjacent to Crescent Lake. 12 acres, 800 feet of lake frontage. Current market value approximately $4 million. Daniel's expression shifted from dismissive to confused as he glanced at the paperwork. I don't understand what this has to do with— I own it, Daniel. Solely and outright. His eyes widened slightly, gaze returning to the documents with new focus. That's not possible. This property is a legacy from Gerald's uncle. Yes. We've maintained it as a rental property for decades. The income is managed through a separate account at this very bank. Daniel's financial mind was visibly recalculating, reassessing assumptions about my economic vulnerability. The property represents part of my estate, I continued evenly. An estate that is now protected by an irrevocable trust with clear capacity, provisions that would render your guardianship petition moot, even if it weren't already baseless. Martha, I'm not finished. I've brought you here because unlike conversations in my home or your office, this meeting is being recorded as part of the bank's security protocols. I gestured toward the discreet camera in the corner. This creates an official record of disclosure regarding my assets and mental capacity, further undermining any claim that I'm unable to manage my affairs. Daniel's expression had transformed completely now, the confident businessman replaced by someone recalibrating a miscalculated position. What do you want? He asked finally. I want the guardianship petition withdrawn immediately. I want acknowledgement that my home remains solely my property and decision. And I want a commitment to cease manipulation attempts regarding my living arrangements or financial affairs. He nodded slowly, the implications of his weakened position clearly sinking. And in return? In return, I don't pursue sanctions or file ethics complaints with your firm or the state licensing board regarding your involvement in this matter. The terms were firm but fair, an off-ramp from unnecessary conflict without humiliating consequences. Daniel was intelligent enough to recognize both the opportunity and the implied threat. I'll need to discuss this with Rebecca. Of course, you have 24 hours. After that, my attorney proceeds with our response as planned. The meeting concluded shortly thereafter, Daniel departing with copies of the property documentation, and considerably less confidence than he'd arrived with. I remained in the conference room, emotions finally catching up now that the performance was complete. Helen arrived 15 minutes later, concern evident in her expression. "How did it go?" she asked, settling into the chair Daniel had vacated. "About as expected," I replied, suddenly exhausted. He was surprised by the property disclosure, taken aback by the recording. He'll talk to Rebecca. "Do you think they'll withdraw the petition?" I nodded. "Daniel will insist on it. It's financially and professionally prudent now. And Rebecca? What happens with her after this?" The question triggered a wave of sadness I'd held at bay during the confrontation. "I don't know, Helen. I honestly don't know if there's any way back from this." Helen reached across the table, squeezing my hand gently. "Give it time. Today was about protection, about boundaries. Reconciliation, if possible, comes later." We left the bank together, driving to Helen's home for tea and quiet conversation. The immediate crisis appeared manageable, but the deeper wound remained, a fundamental rupture in trust between mother and daughter that no legal resolution could fully address. True to my prediction, Daniel called the next morning. His tone was businesslike, without the condescending edge that had characterized our recent interactions. "Martha, I've spoken with Rebecca. We're withdrawing the guardianship petition today. Our attorney will file the necessary paperwork before noon." "Thank you," I said simply. "I want to be clear," he continued. "Our concerns about your living alone weren't entirely fabricated. Rebecca genuinely worries." "I understand concern," I replied. "What I can't accept is control disguised as concern." A pause. "That's fair. Is there anything else?" Another pause, longer this time. "Rebecca would like to talk. Not immediately, but soon. She's processing everything." The careful phrasing suggested emotional turmoil I could well imagine. Despite everything, my heart ached for my daughter. "Tell her I'm open to conversation when she's ready," I offered. "But it needs to be honest. No agendas, no manipulation." "I'll let her know." After the call ended, I stood in my kitchen, gazing out at the garden where spring flowers had begun their annual emergence. The protective legal maneuvers had succeeded, the immediate threat neutralized through disclosure and boundary setting. Yet victory felt hollow given the relational damage left in its wake. For several days following the petition's withdrawal, I moved through life mechanically, completing routine tasks, maintaining my home, attending garden club meetings, all while carrying a persistent emptiness that no activity seemed to fill. The absence of conflict with Rebecca created space for grief to expand, consuming quiet moments with questions I couldn't answer. How had we arrived at this point? What had I missed along the way? Was reconciliation even possible after such profound betrayal? On the 7th day of silence, the doorbell rang shortly after breakfast. Through the peephole, I saw Rebecca standing alone on my porch. No Daniel beside her, no documents in hand. She looked smaller somehow, shoulders hunched against morning chill, expression uncertain. For a moment, I considered not answering, retreating into the safety of continued separation. But something in her posture, a vulnerability I recognized from her childhood, propelled me to open the door. "Mom," she said softly, eyes meeting mine briefly before sliding away. "Can we talk?" I hesitated, then stepped aside. "Come in." She entered cautiously, as if crossing a threshold into unfamiliar territory, rather than the home where she'd grown up. In the living room, she perched on the edge of the sofa, hands clasped tightly in her lap. "Would you like coffee?" I offered, the social script providing structure where emotional landscape remained uncertain. "No, thank you." She drew a deep breath. "I've been trying to find the right words for days now." I settled into the armchair opposite her, waiting. "The guardianship petition was wrong," she began. "Completely wrong. I want you to know I've fired the attorney who advised us on it. It wasn't just bad legal advice, Rebecca, I said quietly. It was a decision you and Daniel made, to try to declare me incompetent rather than respecting my choices. She flinched but didn't deny it. Yes, it was, and I'm ashamed. The admission hung between us, insufficient yet necessary. I keep trying to understand how we got here, she continued, voice unsteady. When Dad died, something shifted. I felt responsible for you, like I needed to step into his role somehow, to take care of you the way he would have wanted. By controlling me? Rebecca winced. That's not how I saw it initially. I genuinely believed I was helping, protecting you from isolation, from making decisions you might regret later. Decisions like keeping my own home, managing my own finances. It sounds terrible when you put it that way, she acknowledged. But in my mind, it was about security, about ensuring you weren't vulnerable. Even if that meant making me vulnerable to you instead? She had no ready answer for that, her gaze dropping to her tightly clasped hands. Daniel showed me the, property documents, she finally said. The lakefront place. Why didn't you tell me about it? All this time I thought you were barely getting by on Dad's pension and Social Security. You never asked, I pointed out. You assumed financial vulnerability because it fit the narrative you'd constructed, of a mother needing management, rather than respect. Another wince, another truth absorbed. Daniel says you recorded our meeting at the bank? I nodded. A precaution. I needed irrefutable evidence of disclosure and capacity. You shouldn't have needed that, she said, softly. Not with family, not with me. No, I agreed. I shouldn't have. Silence settled between us again, heavy with shared history and recent wounds. Outside, spring sunshine illuminated my garden, highlighting blooms Gerald had planted years earlier, persistent, life continuing despite absence and change. I don't know if you can forgive me, Rebecca finally said. The cognitive evaluation, the petition, crossing those lines was unforgivable. Perhaps, I allowed, but I'm your mother. Forgiveness comes with the territory. Trust, however, must be rebuilt. Hope flickered across her features. How? What can I do? Start by accepting that I am not an extension of you or a problem to be managed. I'm a person with autonomy and agency. I understand that now. Understanding isn't enough, Rebecca. This requires change in how you treat me, in how you speak about me, in how you involve me in decisions that affect my life. She nodded slowly. That's fair. If we move forward, it needs to be as adults with mutual respect, not as caretaker and dependent. I want that, she said, voice strengthening. I want to rebuild what we had. Or something better, maybe. Something healthier. The sincerity in her expression stirred cautious optimism within me. We had a long path ahead, with no guarantee of full restoration. Yet this conversation, honest, without manipulation or agenda, represented the essential first step. I found a letter, I said suddenly, remembering the envelope in my bedside drawer. From your father, written shortly before he died, addressed, to you. I only discovered it recently while organizing his office. Rebecca's eyes widened, a mixture of hope and apprehension crossing her features. What does it say? I don't know. It's sealed. I rose and retrieved the envelope, handing it to her with care. It's yours. Whatever message he left, he meant it for you alone. She accepted the envelope with trembling fingers, tracing Gerald's handwriting with reverent touch. Thank you for not opening it. Of course not. It wasn't mine to read. Rebecca studied the envelope for several long moments before carefully tucking it into her purse. I'm not ready yet, she explained. Whatever Dad wanted to tell me, I want to receive it with a clear conscience. The statement revealed a self-awareness I hadn't expected, acknowledgement that current circumstances colored how she might interpret Gerald's final message. "Would you like tea?" I offered again, the ordinary gesture somehow significant in this fragile moment of reconnection. "Yes," she said, smiling tentatively. "That would be nice." While I prepared tea in the kitchen, I heard Rebecca moving in. The living room, stopping at the mantel where family photographs documented decades of shared history. Through the doorway, I watched her pick up a frame containing a picture of the three of us, Rebecca at about 8 years old, sandwiched between Gerald and me on a summer camping trip, all of us laughing at some forgotten joke. "I remember this. Day?" she called softly. "Dad dropped his hot dog in the lake and that enormous fish jumped up to grab it. You were convinced for years afterward that all fish secretly preferred hot dogs to worms," I replied, returning with the tea tray. Our shared laughter felt rusty but genuine. A small bridge across the chasm recent events had carved between us. We spent the next hour in careful conversation, not addressing the guardianship petition directly, but beginning to reestablish connection through reminiscence and tentative plans. Rebecca mentioned a community theater production she thought I might enjoy. I shared news about my garden club's upcoming exhibition. Small, ordinary exchanges that nonetheless represented significant healing. As she prepared to leave, Rebecca paused at the door. "Mom, I know things can't go back to how they were before, but I don't want to lose you." "You haven't lost me," I assured her. "We're navigating new territory, that's all." She nodded, eyes bright with unshed tears. "Can I call you tomorrow? Maybe we could have lunch this weekend?" "I'd like that," I said honestly. After she left, I returned to the living room, settling into my favorite chair with the remains of my cooling tea. The conversation had been neither perfect nor complete. Many issues remained unaddressed, many hurts unhealed. Yet something essential had shifted, opening possibility where before I'd seen only painful closure. Later that evening, as twilight settled over my neighborhood, I walked through my garden, touching flowers and leaves with gentle appreciation. This home, this land, they represented not just property but continuity, a physical connection to the life Gerald and I had built together. Fighting to maintain autonomy over this space had been necessary, not merely for financial reasons, but for deeper emotional integrity. My phone chimed with a text message from Rebecca. "Thank you for today, for listening, for the chance to start again." I typed a simple response. One day at a time. Hachi. And perhaps that was the wisdom we both needed most. Recognition that healing would come not through dramatic gestures or legal maneuvers, but through consistent small choices to respect boundaries, to listen with openness, to honor the complex reality of each other's lives. The lakefront property revelation had changed the power dynamics between us permanently. Daniel's manipulative strategies had been neutralized by financial disclosure. But the true path forward would be determined not by assets or legal standing, but by our willingness to rebuild trust deliberately, patiently, and with clear-eyed honesty about both past wounds and future possibilities. As darkness fell, I made myself a simple dinner and ate at the kitchen table, no longer feeling the acute loneliness that had characterized recent weeks. Tomorrow would bring lunch plans with Helen, a doctor's appointment I'd scheduled myself, garden club preparations, a life constructed according to my own choices and priorities. Rebecca might become part of that life again, in a healthier capacity than before, or our relationship might remain cordial but distant, forever altered by the guardianship attempt. Either way, I would move forward with the clarity and confidence that came from standing my ground when it mattered most. The seeds of spring were sprouting in my garden. Perhaps new growth was possible for us as well. The tentative peace developing between Rebecca and me over the following weeks felt like walking across newly frozen ice. Each step measured, testing for stability, aware that one misstep could plunge us back into frigid waters. Our weekly lunch. Dates maintained careful distance from contentious topics, focusing instead on neutral ground, community events, books we'd read, the changing seasons. Like skilled diplomats, we negotiated this fragile terrain with polite determination. Daniel remained conspicuously absent from these cautious reconnections. Rebecca mentioned him only in passing, and I didn't press for details about their private conversations regarding me or the withdrawn guardianship petition. This unspoken agreement to compartmentalize helped maintain our delicate truce, though I sometimes wondered what tensions might be brewing behind closed doors. Helen, ever my voice of reason, finally broached the subject during our Thursday coffee meeting at Riverside Cafe. "Have you asked Rebecca about Daniel's reaction?" she inquired, stirring honey into her tea. "To the property revelation, I mean." "No," I admitted, watching steam rise from my cup. "It feels like poking a healing wound." Helen's expression remained thoughtful. "Understandable. But unaddressed issues have a way of resurfacing at inopportune moments. Rebecca hasn't mentioned whether she read Gerald's letter either," I added. "Another topic I'm reluctant to raise first." "You're treading carefully. That's wise." Helen glanced out the cafe window toward the river flowing steadily beyond. "But eventually, Martha, you'll need to address these deeper matters. Real healing can't happen in the shallow end." She was right, of course. Our current détente existed precisely because we avoided anything substantive. The guardianship attempt, the financial revelations, the fundamental question of trust. Real reconciliation would require confronting these issues directly, not permanently circumnavigating them. That evening, an unexpected text message appeared on my phone. "Mom, are you free for dinner Saturday? Daniel and I would like to invite you to our place. Nothing formal, just the three of us." The invitation startled me. Daniel hadn't been present for any of our cautious reconciliation efforts thus far. His inclusion signaled a shift, perhaps toward the more substantive conversations Helen had just advocated. After careful consideration, I replied, "Thank you for the invitation. What time should I arrive?" Her response came quickly. 6:30. Daniel's making his famous lasagna." I texted back a simple confirmation, then sat in my garden contemplating what this dinner might represent. Was it genuine effort toward family reconciliation? A strategic move on Daniel's part? Or something else entirely? The spring flowers offered no answers, but their persistence after winter's harshness provided quiet reassurance. Saturday evening, I prepared myself for various possibilities. I selected an outfit that balanced dignity with approachability, a sage green dress that Gerald had always admired, paired with comfortable yet elegant flats. No need for armor disguised as clothing. My presence alone was statement enough. Rebecca greeted me at their downtown condo with a careful hug and nervous smile. The space looked different somehow, less aggressively contemporary, with new throw pillows softening the angular furniture and fresh flowers brightening the dining table. Small changes, perhaps, but noticeable ones. Daniel emerged from the kitchen wearing an apron and an expression I couldn't quite interpret. Not the cold calculation I'd faced during our bank confrontation, but not entirely comfortable either. "Martha," he offered a tentative handshake. "Thank you for coming." "The lasagna smells wonderful," I replied, accepting his gesture with equal restraint. Conversation during dinner remained surprisingly pleasant, if somewhat stilted. We discussed safe topics: Daniel's brother's new baby, Rebecca's recent work project, my garden club's successful spring exhibition. The elephant in the room remained, unacknowledged through appetizers and main course, though I sensed its looming presence in careful pauses and occasional exchanged glances between Rebecca and Daniel. It wasn't until Rebecca cleared our plates and brought coffee to the table that Daniel finally squared his shoulders and addressed me directly. "Martha, I owe you an apology," he began, his typically confident voice uncharacteristically tentative. "A sincere one. My behavior, our behavior, regarding your home and the guardianship petition was inexcusable. I maintained careful eye contact, neither accepting nor rejecting his words immediately. The property development potential clouded my judgment, he continued, hands clasped tightly before him. I convinced myself our concerns about your welfare were primary, but in reality, I allowed financial considerations to dominate. Rebecca returned to her seat beside him, reaching for his hand in silent support. We've been doing a lot of talking, she added softly, about boundaries, about respect, about what family really means. I sipped my coffee, giving myself time to assess their sincerity. I appreciate the apology. Trust, once broken, takes time to rebuild. Daniel nodded. I understand that. I'm not asking for immediate forgiveness, just an opportunity to demonstrate changed perspective. What's prompted this conversation now? I asked directly. Rebecca and Daniel exchanged glances again. Dad's letter, Rebecca finally said. I read it last week. My heart quickened. I see. He knew he was dying when he wrote it, she continued, voice thick with emotion. He wanted to make sure I understood what truly mattered, about legacy, about how we treat the people we love. Gerald always had exceptional clarity about priorities, I observed quietly. He mentioned the lakefront property, Daniel interjected. Not its value or potential, but what it represented. A place where our family connected, where memories were created. Rebecca reached into her purse and removed the envelope, now carefully opened. He asked me to protect what truly mattered, not assets or investments, but relationships. Especially with you, Mom. Her eyes filled with tears. He knew somehow that I might lose perspective after he was gone, that I might focus on the wrong things, measure value incorrectly. Your father was perceptive, I acknowledged, my own, emotions threatening to surface. The letter made me realize how far I'd strayed from what he valued most, Rebecca admitted. From what I once valued too. Daniel cleared his throat. Rebecca shared the letter with me. It prompted some difficult but necessary conversations between us about priorities, about ethical boundaries in business and family matters. The moment felt genuinely vulnerable. Both of them exposed an acknowledgement of error, without the defensive posturing that had characterized our recent interactions. Still, caution guided my response. I'm glad Gerald's words provided that clarity, I said carefully. His wisdom continued even after he was gone. Mom, Rebecca leaned forward. Earnestly, I know one dinner and apology can't undo everything that's happened. But we needed, to acknowledge our mistakes directly, without excuses. Daniel nodded agreement. The guardianship petition was unconscionable. Using your home as leverage was wrong. Misrepresenting ourselves to contractors was deceptive. And potentially fraudulent. There's no justification for any of it. The directness of his admission surprised me. And your development plans for my neighborhood? Abandoned, he stated firmly. Completely. We've redirected the company toward renovation projects in the commercial district downtown. More sustainable, less disruptive to established communities. Rebecca reached across the table toward me, though she stopped short of touching my hand. We don't expect immediate reconciliation, just a chance to rebuild trust gradually through consistent actions rather than just words. Their earnestness seemed genuine, their remorse unscripted. Still, recent betrayals counseled prudence. I appreciate this conversation, I said finally, and I'm open to continuing our careful reconnection. Time will ultimately demonstrate whether perspective has truly changed. They both nodded, accepting these measured terms without protest. There's something else we wanted to discuss, Rebecca ventured cautiously. The lakefront property. Tension immediately returned to my shoulders. What about it? Not what you're thinking, Daniel interjected quickly. We're not interested in its development potential or financial value. Rebecca shot him a warning glance before continuing. Mom, when's the last time you visited the cabin? Since Dad died, I mean? The question caught me off guard. I haven't. The property management company handles everything. Would you consider visiting this summer? Perhaps the three of us together? Her voice held tentative hope. It might be a way to reconnect with some of those family memories Dad mentioned in his letter. The suggestion was unexpected. Not a financial maneuver, but a relational gesture. Still, wariness remained. Why now? I asked directly. Because we've lost so much time already to misplaced priorities, Rebecca answered. Because that place held meaning for our family beyond its monetary value. Because... Her voice faltered momentarily. Because Dad specifically mentioned, in his letter, how much he regretted that we'd stopped going there as a family in his final years. I hadn't visited the lakefront property since Gerald's diagnosis 4 years earlier. We'd planned to spend a final summer there, but his rapid decline had made travel impossible. The idea of returning now, with Rebecca and even Daniel, stirred complicated emotions. Grief at Gerald's absence, hope for healing, lingering caution about their motives. I'll consider it, I offered finally. Not immediately, but perhaps later this summer. They accepted this non-committal response without pushing, and conversation gradually shifted to lighter topics for the remainder of the evening. When I prepared to leave, Rebecca embraced me with less hesitation than before. Thank you for coming tonight, she murmured. It meant a lot to both of us. One step at a time, I reminded her gently. Daniel maintained respectful distance but offered a parting comment that seemed genuinely reflective. I've been wrong about many things, Martha. Most significantly in underestimating you. That won't happen again. Driving home through quiet streets, I found myself turning over the evening's revelations with cautious optimism. Gerald's letter had apparently catalyzed genuine introspection for both Rebecca and Daniel. While I remained guarded about fully trusting their changed perspective, their acknowledgement of specific wrongdoing, without qualification or excuse, represented significant progress. The following weeks brought tangible evidence of their sincerity. Without fanfare or self-congratulation, Daniel emailed documentation of his company's formal withdrawal from any development projects in my neighborhood, along with confirmation that they had redirected investments toward the downtown revitalization Rebecca had mentioned. More telling was Rebecca's approach to our continued relationship, respectful of boundaries, attentive without hovering, no longer pushing for decisions. About my living situation or financial arrangements, our weekly lunches gradually evolved from careful small talk to more substantive conversations, including tentative discussions of past hurts and future hopes. By early June, I finally decided to accept Rebecca's invitation to visit the lakefront property. We scheduled a weekend in late June, arranging to travel separately. Rebecca and Daniel would drive up Friday afternoon, while I would follow Saturday morning, allowing me a planned escape route if needed. The night before my departure, I found myself in Gerald's office, surrounded by photographs of our early visits to the cabin. Rebecca as a toddler splashing in shallow water, Gerald proudly displaying a fish while 10-year-old Rebecca grimaced. At its wriggling form, teenage Rebecca sunbathing on the dock during what would be our last family vacation there before college, and adult life drew her toward other priorities. These images stirred bittersweet nostalgia, but also reinforced my purpose in accepting this invitation. The lakefront property had never been primarily about financial security or investment value. It had been about family connection, about creating space apart from daily pressures where relationships could deepen and memories could form. Saturday morning dawned bright and clear, perfect weather for the 3-hour drive northward. I packed lightly, clothing for 2 days, toiletries, a novel I'd been meaning to finish. As I placed these items in my overnight bag, I hesitated before adding one more, A small photo album containing those early pictures from the cabin. Not for reminiscing alone, but potentially for sharing, for rebuilding connections through shared history. The drive itself became unexpectedly therapeutic. As urban sprawl gave way to rolling countryside, and eventually to dense forest surrounding gleaming lakes, I felt tension gradually easing from my shoulders. This landscape had always affected me this way, its natural beauty cutting through, mental clutter, its vastness putting human concerns in perspective. The private access road to the cabin remained familiar despite my years of absence, winding through pine forests before emerging at a clearing overlooking Whitefish Bay. The cabin itself looked remarkably well maintained, the property management company having fulfilled their responsibilities admirably. Fresh paint gleamed on the shutters, flower boxes bloomed with colorful annuals, and the dock extended invitingly into crystal-clear water. Rebecca was waiting on the porch as I pulled into the gravel driveway, her expression a mixture of nervous anticipation and genuine welcome. She hurried down the steps to greet me. "You made it," she said, embracing me briefly. "How was the drive?" "Beautiful," I replied honestly. I'd forgotten how restorative this journey can be. "Dad always said that too," she remembered, helping with my bag. That the drive itself was part of the experience, not just getting from point A to point B. Daniel appeared in the doorway, offering a restrained wave rather than approaching immediately, respecting personal space in a way he'd rarely demonstrated before. "I've made lunch," he called. "Nothing fancy, just sandwiches and fruit from the local market." The cabin's interior remained largely as I remembered. Knotty pine walls housing comfortable, unpretentious furniture designed for relaxation rather than impression. The stone fireplace dominating the main room still displayed the collection of smooth lake stones Gerald and Rebecca had gathered during summers past, each with a date carefully painted on its surface. "I can't believe these are still here," Rebecca commented, touching one gently. "Summer 1991, the year I found that heart-shaped one." "Your father insisted on keeping perfect records," I smiled at the memory. "Date, location, which of you found it?" "Daniel and I sleep in the guest room," Rebecca said, gesturing toward the hallway. "We thought you might want the main bedroom." The consideration behind this arrangement touched me unexpectedly. The main bedroom had always been Gerald's and mine, larger, with windows overlooking the lake and private access to the small deck where we'd shared countless morning coffees. After lunch on the screened porch, Daniel excused himself to check on a dockboard that needed securing, leaving Rebecca and me alone. We carried our iced teas to the small beach area, settling into Adirondack chairs facing the water. "Thank you for coming," Rebecca said after a comfortable silence. "I wasn't sure you would." "Neither was I admitted. "But being here feels right somehow." She nodded understanding. "It's strange. The cabin looks almost exactly the same, but everything else has changed so profoundly." "Not everything," I suggested gently. "Some things endure." Rebecca's gaze remained fixed on the horizon, where sunlight danced across gentle waves. Dad's letter. He knew me better than I knew myself. He predicted exactly how I might lose perspective after he was gone. "Your father always had remarkable insight into people's hearts," I acknowledged, "especially those he loved most." "He wrote about this place specifically," she continued. "Not its monetary value, but its soul value, he called it. The memories, embedded in its walls, the lessons learned on its shores." I smiled at the phrase, so typically Gerald in its simple profundity. "He also wrote about you, Mom. About your strength, your quiet dignity, how he hoped I would honor those qualities, rather than mistaking them for weakness." The revelation sent warmth spreading through my chest, Gerald's faith in me continuing even beyond his physical presence. "I failed him in that," Rebecca admitted softly. "Failed you too. Mistook independence for vulnerability, dignity for stubbornness. We all lose our way sometimes, I offered. The important thing is recognizing when we've strayed from our better selves. She turned to face me directly. I don't deserve your generosity. It's not about deserving, I replied. It's about choosing the path that brings healing rather than further harm. Holding on to anger would only diminish me, not strengthen me. Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. You know, all those months when we were pressuring you about selling, your house, about moving to retirement communities, I never once asked what you wanted. Not really. I assumed I knew better. That's the heart of it, I agreed. Not the specific actions, but the underlying assumption that my agency didn't matter, that my preferences were obstacles rather than valid choices. I'm so sorry, she whispered, the simple words carrying profound weight in their unadorned sincerity. I know, I acknowledged, and I believe your remorse is genuine. We sat quietly after that, watching a pair of loons glide across the bay, their occasional calls echoing across the water. The silence felt companionable rather than strained, a shared moment of reflection in a setting that had witnessed so many chapters of our family story. Eventually, Rebecca spoke again. Mom, there's something I've been wanting to ask, but I'm afraid it might seem insensitive given everything that's happened. You can ask, I said, leaving response options open. Rebecca hesitated, then continued, carefully. I've been thinking about your bakery dream, the one Dad always said you'd pursue someday. The one you mentioned wanting to celebrate at the Michelin place before everything went sideways. The reference to my long-deferred dream of opening a small bakery, the spark that had initiated our entire conflict months earlier, caught me by surprise. What about it? I asked cautiously. Have you ever thought about pursuing it now? Not necessarily a full commercial bakery, but perhaps something smaller scale? A specialty business focusing on what you love most? I studied her expression, searching for hidden agendas but finding what appeared to be genuine curiosity. I've considered it occasionally, I admitted, but starting a business at my age seems impractical. Rebecca seemed to choose her next words with particular care. Age doesn't seem like the right metric for that decision. Energy, passion, skill, those matter more, and you have all three in abundance. The affirmation, delivered without condescension, warmed something long cold within me. Why do you ask? I inquired. Because I've been thinking about what supporting you actually means, she replied thoughtfully. Not taking over or directing your life, but actually supporting your desires and dreams, the things that matter to you. The lakefront weekend. Concluded with a tentative plan to return in July, Rebecca and Daniel for weekends, myself for a longer stay if I desired. The cabin that had featured in our conflict as a financial asset had been reclaimed as what Gerald always intended, a place of connection and renewal. 3 weeks later, I found myself sitting in Helen's sunny kitchen, discussing something I never imagined would resurface at my age, a business plan. You're serious about this bakery idea? Helen asked, reading the notes I'd prepared. Not a full-scale retail operation, I clarified. A specialty business focusing on custom celebration cakes, small volume, high quality. Helen smiled broadly. Martha Wilson, entrepreneur at 68. I love it. It's terrifying, I admitted. And exhilarating. Like rediscovering part of myself I'd packed away. Have you told Rebecca? I nodded. She's been unexpectedly supportive. Even offered to help with the business registration paperwork. And Daniel? Surprisingly enthusiastic. He suggested a corner of their building downtown that's been sitting vacant. Good visibility, manageable space. Helen raised her eyebrows. You're comfortable with that level of involvement? The offer comes without strings, I explained. Market rate rent, formal lease agreement, no equity stake for them, professional boundaries. We discussed logistics, timelines, and financial considerations. The lakefront property's value provided security that made this venture possible. Not risk-free, but not reckless either. By afternoon's end, Martha's milestone cakes had evolved from distant dream to actionable plan. October arrived with a bittersweet milestone, the 5th anniversary of Gerald's passing. Rather than isolating in grief as I had in previous years, I invited Rebecca and Daniel to join me at the cemetery, followed by dinner at my home. The visit was quiet, reflective, healing in its shared remembrance. Over dinner, Rebecca raised her glass to Dad, who somehow knew we'd need his wisdom even after he was gone. To Gerald, Daniel echoed respectfully. To the man who believed in dreams, I added, thinking of the bakery that would open its doors the following week, even when they seemed impossible. Later that evening, as Rebecca helped clear dishes, she paused suddenly. "Mom, I've been meaning to ask. That night of the snowstorm, when you came to get us after our accident, you knew then about the lakefront property, about its value." I nodded, remembering that bitter night when they'd left me to walk through blizzard conditions. "You could have told us then," she continued. "Used it to shock us into better behavior. Why didn't you?" I considered the question carefully, because revealing it then would have been about power or revenge. I wanted any reconciliation between us to be based on genuinely changed hearts, not financial calculations. Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. "We didn't deserve that consideration." "Perhaps not," I acknowledged. "But relationships aren't built on deserving. They're built on choosing to see the best possibility in each other, even when evidence suggests otherwise." "You sound like Dad," she said, half laughing, half crying. "The highest compliment," I smiled. November brought the official opening of Martha's milestone cakes. The modest storefront, decorated in warm creams and sage greens, featured a small display case and consultation area where clients could discuss custom designs for significant celebrations. Behind velvet ropes, visitors could glimpse the kitchen where I would create these edible masterpieces. Rebecca and Daniel attended the small opening reception, along with Helen, garden club friends, and curious neighbors. Daniel's support had remained consistently professional, helpful with permits and regulations, but respectful of boundaries. Rebecca had found a perfect balance of enthusiasm without overstepping, celebrating my vision rather than attempting to redirect it. As I cut the ceremonial first cake, a miniature replica of the Michelin-starred dessert I'd once been denied, I realized how completely the narrative had shifted. From a woman perceived as vulnerable and declining, I had emerged as vibrant and entrepreneurial. From family members who saw me as an obstacle to their ambitions, Rebecca and Daniel had evolved into supportive, if chastened, allies. Most importantly, I had reclaimed the essential truth Gerald always recognized: that age might change circumstances but need not diminish capacity for growth, for contribution, for joy in new pursuits. December arrived with another significant marker, the 1st anniversary of the snowstorm that had exposed the fractures in our family. The forecast called for heavy snow again, weather patterns cycling as reliably as seasons of life. This time, when snowflakes began falling, Rebecca called immediately. "Mom, the weather's turning bad. Daniel and I are heading your way to help. Secure your garden furniture and check your emergency supplies." "That's thoughtful, but not necessary," I assured her. "I'm perfectly capable." "I know you are," she interrupted gently. "That's not why we're coming. We're coming because that's what family does. Shows up for each other, especially when reminded of past failures." They arrived 20 minutes later, bringing not demands or judgments but practical assistance and takeout dinner from my favorite restaurant. We spent the evening playing board games as snow accumulated outside, the howling wind no longer carrying echoes of rejection, but simply marking the boundary between our warm sanctuary and winter's natural progression. When the power flickered, briefly during a strong gust, Daniel immediately checked the backup systems while Rebecca lit candles, not taking over, but contributing from concern rather than control. "Remember last year?" Rebecca said quietly as we watched snow swirling beyond the windows. "We left you standing in the cold. I've never been more ashamed of anything." "Last year feels like another lifetime," I observed. "So much has changed." "You changed us," Daniel said unexpectedly. "By standing your ground, by refusing to be diminished. You showed us a different way to be family." "Gerald's letter changed you," I corrected gently. "Dad's words opened the door," Rebecca acknowledged. "But your dignity, your resilience even as we behaved terribly, that's what truly transformed us." As midnight approached, Rebecca and Daniel prepared to leave, the snowfall having stabilized into manageable accumulation. "Stay, if you'd prefer," I offered. "The guest room is always ready." "We should get back," Daniel replied. "Early client meeting tomorrow, but thank you, genuinely." At the door, Rebecca embraced me tightly. "1 year ago, I made the worst mistake of my life, putting property before family. I'll spend the rest of my days making sure I never repeat it." "That's the thing about mistakes," I said, returning. Her embrace. "The wisest among us use them as foundation stones rather than stumbling blocks." After they left, I stood at my window watching their taillights disappear into the snowy night. Unlike last year, they had called to confirm their safe arrival home. Unlike last year, I felt wrapped in connection rather than isolated by rejection. The woman who had shivered in her car during last year's blizzard, believing herself discarded by her only child, had undergone her own transformation, not just surviving betrayal, but emerging stronger, clearer about her worth, more intentional about her remaining years. The lakefront property that had featured in our family drama as a concealed asset had become something truer to Gerald's vision, a place of reconnection and healing. My home remained my sanctuary, respected now as extension of my autonomy rather than obstacle to others' ambitions. And my long-deferred dream of creating celebration cakes had evolved from wistful fantasy to flourishing reality. Snowflakes continued falling, no longer symbols of bitter rejection, but simply winter's beautifying transformation of familiar landscapes. Like those crystalline formations, each unique, each fragile, each part of larger patterns, our family had been reshaped by difficult weather into something more authentic and resilient than before. I turned from the window and moved through my home, still mine, always mine, touching familiar surfaces with appreciation for all they represented. The journey from that desperate snowstorm to this peaceful evening had been neither straight nor simple. Yet standing now in hard-won security, I recognize that sometimes being pushed out into life's coldest moments can reveal our deepest strengths, most essential truths, and most promising paths forward. The house they had once schemed to take from me had become the home where they now visited with humbled hearts. The bakery dream they had once mocked had become the business they now celebrated with genuine pride. And the mother they had once discarded during a snowstorm had become the woman whose forgiveness they now cherished above any property or possession. Some storms, it seems, clear the air most effectively of all. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.